I recently finished the entirety of Mafia Definitive Edition from start to finish, and it is an amazing game. Purely if you consider the setting, the environment, and the characters in the game. Do note this game is not like a gameplay driven game, this is not a gameplay first game. It is more about the story, the environment, the characters, that element of gameplay. It is more like a quasi open world game where there aren't many side missions that you can do in the open world. The open world is just an element onto itself. It is something that you can discover and have this opportunity to see different places at that point of time in the real world, which they have mirrored very accurately in the game. The setting that the game is in is so immaculate. It is during the 1930s, the economic crash during that time, and the essence of New York is pure in the game that they have made. I do want to talk about the setting first before actually diving into the story. And the setting of the game is basically the exposition that they give for the setting of the game is really unique. Yeah, one is the buildings, the overwhelming environment that they present in, but you see like the uniformity in basically everything, from the cars to the buildings to the guns to the suits. All of these things look picture perfect when you impose them over one another. It is a really good depiction of the environment, and that was one of the main things that I really loved about the game. Also, the story is very cohesive, it is very well told from start to finish. There is no stopping point for the story, there is no plateau in the development of the characters, there's no plateau in the development of the plotline in general, and you have other main characters who are very effective and who do help the main plotline to progress. But I have a main criticism towards the story, where towards the end I feel like they did fumble the writing a little bit. Obviously, I don't expect everybody to have the same opinion, it is something of subjective opinion. I do feel wholeheartedly that towards the end they did fumble a lot of what they developed throughout the game. I just feel that's a major disappointment for me as when it comes to the story and game that they have set up. Also, I do feel that there are certain instances in the game where the gameplay mechanics that they had introduced was not up to the mark or not completely there yet, but it's a game that's come out almost 6-7 years ago at this point, and for what it is and what it stands for in 2025, it's a pretty good game. So we follow around Tony, who initially starts off as a cab driver, and one fateful night he encounters two people, Sam and Polly, where they are running away from a bunch of other people, and they were being pursued by them and being actively attacked when they meet Tommy for the first time. And upon meeting Tommy, they go ahead and threaten him to basically drive them to safety, drive them to their boss's place or their boss's bar, towards Salieri's bar. And eventually, Tommy and Polly and Sam make their initial acquaintance. Tommy eventually joins forces with Salieri, and there are basically two major factions in this game. One is Salieri himself, and the other one is Morello. And these two used to be brothers, like they used to be tight back in the day, but then they had falling out, and now they're constantly in tussle over influence and who gets to keep more power. Typical gangster stuff. And eventually, Tommy starts doing the bad bidding of Salieri, which is kind of baffling, and I'll talk about why the ending of the game was such a disappointment. I mean, it was not a major disappointment, but it was still disappointing considering how much they built up the story, and it didn't have a satisfying conclusion. But Tommy starts doing all of Salieri's bidding, so he goes to different businesses and starts collecting protection money. And then there is like this one mission where you're supposed to win a race. I will tell you this, I've played a lot of single player games. Nothing comes close to this freaking race. Holy shit, man. Like, I've played a lot of single player games, but nothing could have prepared me for this race. I spent a good 2 hours just grinding this race, and I wasn't getting anywhere. Eventually, I pulled through and got through the race, I guess. Finally, after the race was finished, you are introduced to Sarah, who eventually becomes like your love interest later on. Again, it's not that important. She's not that important of a character to begin with. The other two characters that are really important, who are basically on the front lines with Tommy, are Sam and Polly. And there are missions where you eventually get close to them and you basically end up becoming really close. You get slightly more closer to Polly than Sam, and this is kind of important towards the ending, so keep that in mind. After the race, the only reasons like the Sarah's characters becomes important to the storyline is basically you're escorting Sarah home one day and a couple of goons try to act smart. Eventually you get into a tussle with them, but they happen to be like the mayor's like son and close to the mayor of New York City, and you end up killing them. And you end up killing the son and critically injuring one of the friends, and this leads to one of the most fun missions in the game, according to me. uh, Later on you end up killing both of them, which makes the mayor of the city like very much against Salieri. Like he's on the horns wanting to get to Salieri, and basically this gives an up for Morello to gain more influence. Again, throughout the game you have like these bits and pieces of history that are sprinkled throughout like the different levels and different areas in the game, which sort of indicate the overall which sort of gives you a vibe of the overall history happening. So you get snippets of newspapers, you have things which are very reminiscent towards that period of time, and I think that was a really cool touch, basically like conveying your history, conveying the time period through these small tidbits of information. That was a really cool touch. And during all this you meet different side characters. The major side characters are Salieri, you have Frank, Sarah, Sam, Polly, and you have Sarah's father, who's like the bartender at Salieri's bar. So these are like the major side characters who are with you, and then there is the other side, who is Morello's side. Like the side characters in Morello's side is Morello himself and his little brother Sergio. So these are basically like the main characters inside the game, and Frank sort of becomes like this person who tries to help you, sort of becomes like this big brother figure for you, tries to look out for you and help you out. And eventually what happens is Frank is basically been working with Salieri for a really long time. He's been working with Salieri since they were kids, and eventually Frank wants an out. And the thing about like gangsters and mafias is once you enter like the family, there is no out of the family. Like you live, breathe and die within the family. But Frank wants an out. He thinks like the heat on Salieri has become too much since the mayor, like I said, like the mayor is very much against Salieri now since you basically killed his son. So Frank thinks the heat is too much on him and there's a higher risk that he might end up getting killed. So he wants an out. And eventually he agrees to trade with Morello of Salieri's accounts, and basically Salieri catches wind of this and he sends us, or Tommy, to basically kill Frank. But Frank has been this big brother figure of yours, and eventually when you encounter Sam, when you come face to face with Frank, uh you basically let him go, and Frank tells you where the books are of Salieri. So you get back the books and you basically lie to Salieri saying that you got Frank. And basically like that's about it of Frank. You don't hear from Frank anymore. He flies off to like a different country, I think Macau, I'm not really sure. It's not really relevant to the plot. And basically in Frank's funeral, because we allegedly killed Frank, you get to see Morello, Sergio, our gang face to face for the first time. And for the life of me, I don't know why you guys didn't just kill each other right there. The game would have been over, I guess. Major plot armor because of that. And then one prosecutor basically gets evidence against Salieri, and you basically have to steal said evidence. So basically this is one of those missions which are memorable in the game, and I absolutely despise this mission because this was a stealth mission. And the game's mechanics are already bad enough, but when it comes to like stealth, it just straight up sucks, dude. Just There is nothing more for me to add. Anyways, you end up like this. You end up at this prosecutor's home, which is like basically the entrance is like this catacomb area, and you have to basically uh, time each person, and you basically have to time each enemy. So you basically have to find a predisposed way to get rid of all the enemies, and if they spot you, it's basically game over. Again, a pain in the ass for me to get through this mission. I didn't enjoy this mission that much because it was tough for the reason of being tough. It wasn't tough. It wasn't fun tough. It was tough, if you know what I'm talking about. Again, there's like a huge shootout in like the prosecutor's home, and basically you make a mess of yourself again. So you basically turn up the heat to the max right now against Salieri, and eventually Polly comes up with an idea of basically dealing with the person who is under Morello's protection. And while they were negotiating and like basically finishing up their deal, Morello's goons come in, basically have a shootout again, common theme in the video game, and like you eventually smuggle away like a basket of whiskey and liquor, which during this time, during the economic depression in New York, it was banned basically. So it was a invaluable commodity for gangsters and one of their major sources of income. So that was one of the that was another mission which I really had fun with. And you end up taking the Don to like a restaurant to have lunch. Basically you become his chauffeur, and one of the previous Don's chauffeur ends up betraying the Don, and ends up giving away his location to Morello. Eventually Tommy and Don are ambushed by Morello's men, and basically all hell breaks loose, and now your Morello basically declared war against Salieri. So shit hits the fan at this moment. It's one of the most beautiful missions in the game. You basically are on like this board during that time, and it looks pretty cool. It looks very aesthetic, and finally you end up shooting the mayor. Again, very common theme in this game, shooting up mayors who are against this gangster culture of mafia in New York, and want to get rid of it. So you shoot him up. This person was very close to Morello. I think this was the same person whose son we shot up. Eventually you shoot up this guy, and now you basically declare war. Now instead of going against Morello, we now go against Sergio, who was Morello's younger brother, and basically we end up planting a bomb in his car, and instead of him dying, his wife dies, which is one of the most significant events in the game. This is the moment where Tommy's switch flips, and he's now more empathic. He also at this time he's married to Sarah. He has kids. This is one of the major turning points in the game, in the storyline as of such. Long story short, eventually you end up killing Sergio and Morello, and now basically Salieri owns New York. He is basically the king of New York, and a lot of time passes. A lot of things happen, which is behind the scene. They don't let you in much. Again, the same mission of like go and shoot up a candidate who's against mafia culture, and again, like I told, it's a very common theme in the story. And eventually the Don sends the trio, Sam, Polly and Tommy, to a mission to basically steal diamonds. So the Don says there's a shipment which is in the shipping dock, basically, which is being monitored by like the border control, like a very top security mission, and you basically have to stealth in and stealth out. It's one of the stealth missions. I had really fun in this mission. And in Tommy's, Polly's and Sam's eye, this is like a life-threatening. They have put themselves in a really life-threatening situation. Like they have a lot of, they put themselves under a lot of heat while doing this mission. And at the end of the day, instead of the smuggled items being diamonds, which the Don told it will be, it ends up being the white powder. And this pisses off Tommy and Polly. Sam is still chill, but it really pisses off Polly and Tommy, because they are people who put themselves in harm's way, like really badly. And this is again the second turning point in the game. Now Polly is basically plotting a plan to rob a bank, and his ideology is. And the thing about one thing that you have to remember in this mafia culture is you don't go against the boss's orders whatsoever, and you get multiple warnings and multiple things pointing towards that general intuition throughout the game, but you don't go against the boss ever. Eventually, Paul and Tommy do end up robbing a bank, and Polly's argument is, once we rob the bank, we will let the Don know later and then give him a cut, because if we let him know before, he might not let us rob the bank, because again, it's a high risk, high reward kind of situation. Eventually, they rob a bank, and Polly just takes all the money with him, and Polly is in his apartment. Tom goes home again, normal day for him. But when he goes back and visits Polly, he sees Polly dead. Polly is shot up, and the money is missing. Throughout the game, Polly has been this beacon for Tommy to for satire, for humor, and Tommy really treated Polly as a friend. Like, he was really close to Polly as compared to Sam. Eventually, Tommy lets Sam know that Polly has been shot up, and Sam asks Tommy to meet him at this art gallery, which is very reminiscent of the last house in Scarface. And eventually, you find out that Sam is the one who killed Polly. And I'm not going to say that I was shocked or anything. Like, it was kind of obvious because you never let Sam in on it. And basically, Sam explains that the Don, basically, Sam rats out your plan to the Don. And he also tells that they eventually found Frank, whom Tommy, let him go freely. And they end up killing Frank as well, including his family, his wife and daughter. And basically, that's how the story ends. Tommy fights his way through, kills Sam, doesn't take the money, and he basically reaches out to a FBI agent and a policeman to basically act as a witness to bring in Don Salieri. Basically, there are two timelines. There is the story timeline that I just explained, and the other timeline where Tom is basically explaining these events chronologically to the inspector, whom he's going to rat himself out, and is gonna act as a witness to bring in Salieri in return for the protection of him and his family. Um, Eventually, Salieri gets put in prison. Tom also gets put in prison because Tommy is equally guilty. He's killed a lot of people, done a lot of misdeeds. Uh, it get Fast forward to a few years. Tommy has finished serving his sentence, and he basically has this grandiose speech in his daughter's wedding of what it means to have family. Basically becomes Don Toretto. Basically becomes Dom Toretto, and eventually Salieri's goons find Tommy and kill him. And that's how the story ends. And like I said, the major pain point for me in the ending was considering what Tommy has done for the Don. Like, every major milestone that the Don has achieved is through Tommy. And considering that so much of it was done by Tommy, I don't know why the Don didn't sit and talk it through with Tommy. Like, yeah, on the one hand, family is everything and you don't go against the boss, but come on, man, your empire is basically built, 90% of whatever the empire that you have is done with the help of Tommy, and you couldn't have spoken with him. I think that was one silly point for me in the game. And throughout the game, like I told, you end up just doing almost the same thing with shooting up mayors who are against you. And yeah, that's one of the main pain points that I had in the game. But that's been about it. This game was really fun. I highly recommend you pick it up, because I picked the game up when it was on sale. So if you do find the game on sale, do recommend picking it up. And yeah, that's been about it. Bye.